are 7 clear signs a dismissive avoidant actually does like you. We've all been there. You meet someone who seems confident, independent, maybe even a little emotionally aloof. And suddenly, this isn't about you not. You're on a roller chase. They don't gush, and they sure as hell don't say, "I like you," like they're in a rom-com. But what if I told you that some of the emotionally distant people, yes, even dismissive avoidants, do fall in love, they just show it differently? So today, I want to give you 7 clear signs a dismissive avoidant actually does like you, even if their version of affection looks nothing like the movies. When it comes to emotionally unavailable people, particularly those with dismissive avoidant attachment styles, one of the most powerful yet easily overlooked signs of genuine interest is consistency. And no, we're not talking about grand romantic gestures or over-the-top declarations of love. For someone with a dismissive avoidant personality, those things are usually outside their comfort zone. What does matter, often more than words, is the consistent effort they make to stay present in your life. Dismissive avoidants tend to be highly protective of their autonomy. They value independence above all else, often using emotional and physical distance as a defense mechanism to maintain control and avoid vulnerability. They're not typically the type to fall into fast-paced, high-intensity dynamics. In fact, intense emotional closeness might get their fear of engulfment or losing their identity within a relationship. So when you notice that someone who normally prioritizes their space starts to include you in their daily or weekly routine, even in small ways, that's a clear shift. That's not just friendliness or politeness. It's intentional. Think about it for someone who often avoids emotional entanglements, taking the time to text you regularly, follow through with plans, or even remember and check in about something you told them last week is not insignificant. That kind of consistency, while subtle, shows they're not just reacting in the moment. They're making room for your time. It's not just, "I miss you" at midnight, or "I've been thinking about you" after a week of silence. It's, "Hey, how did that presentation go?" Or "I saw this and thought of you." It's showing up, even when they don't have to. That effort means they are gradually shifting out of self-protection and into connection, and that shift, for them, doesn't come easily. They may not fully recognize it themselves or even be able to articulate it, but on some level, they are choosing consistency over comfort. They're making the decision to be in touch, to be part of your life rhythm, rather than retreating the moment emotional intimacy is required. Consistency also reflects emotional safety. For a dismissive avoidant to keep showing up, it means they feel they won't be criticized, chased, or pressured into giving more than they're ready to. They feel allowed to be themselves, imperfect, guarded, but still involved. And that kind of emotional safety is what makes them more likely to stay connected, even if their emotional expression is quieter or more measured than what you're used to. So the real sign isn't passion, urgency, or dramatic romantic moments. It's the stable, steady presence. The check-ins, the callbacks, the making time. They're not love bombing. They're building trust slowly. And for someone who often runs at the first hint of closeness, that is a very real sign they're starting to care. Dismissive avoidants are often misunderstood when it comes to the way they handle space and distance in relationships. To someone more secure or anxious in attachment, their behavior can look like disinterest, coldness, or even rejection. But what sets apart a dismissive avoidant who actually likes you is the way they handle that distance. The silence isn't filled with finality. It's filled with intention. They don't vanish without a trace or leave you confused for weeks on end. Instead, their withdrawal comes with a sense of respect, and that's a subtle but meaningful difference. Avoidants aren't wired to process emotions in real time like others might be. When things become too intimate or emotionally intense, they often need to pull back and regulate themselves. This isn't about punishing you or playing games. It's about managing their own internal overhaul. But here's the key: when they like you, they come back. They don't disappear permanently or leave you stranded in emotional limbo. Their distance is temporary, not indefinite. You may notice that even when they need space, they still keep the connection intact in some way. Maybe they don't text for a couple of days, but then they check in, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely want to re-engage. It might not be emotional gushing, but it's consistent with their patterns of reconnection. That's their way of saying, "I still value this, even if I need a moment." The difference between someone who's avoiding you versus someone who is avoidant but interested lies in the follow-up. Do they come back with care? Do they acknowledge the time apart or make an effort to re-establish closeness, even in small ways? That's respect. That's the recognition that while they need space to feel emotionally safe, this isn't about they also care enough to not leave you hanging in the process. Another layer to this is that they don't gaslight or dismiss your emotional needs. A dismissive avoidant who genuinely likes you won't shame you for needing closeness, even if they can't always meet you there immediately. They may not always have the language for it, but they try. You can feel the difference between someone who avoids accountability versus someone who simply needs a bit more time and space to process things before re-engaging. And while it may not seem romantic in the conventional sense, this kind of respectful distance is its own form of affection. It's someone saying, I'm doing my best to stay connected in a way that feels manageable for me and safe for you. It's subtle, it's quiet, but it's deeply intentional. So if you're experiencing space from someone and you're unsure where you stand, pay close attention to what happens next. If they circle back with presence, consistency, and respect, not excuses or defensiveness, then what you're seeing isn't disinterest. It's someone trying, in the only way they know how, to stay close without losing themselves. This is not a red flag, that's emotional growth in motion. One of the clearest signs that a dismissive avoidant likes you, really likes you, is when they begin trying to understand your emotional world. This isn't about, even if they don't always know how to respond to it, this isn't their natural habitat. These are people who often grew up believing that vulnerability was a liability and emotional needs were best handled independently, if acknowledged at all. But when they start paying attention to your emotions, when they try to understand what matters to you, that's a subtle but powerful shift that should not be overlooked. It may not look like long, deep heart-to-heart conversations. It probably won't involve them mirroring your feelings or validating everything you say in a dramatic, expressive way. But you'll start to notice them asking questions. You'll see them pause your speaking, trying to really listen instead of changing the subject. Maybe they bring up something you mentioned earlier, a challenge at work, a story about your family, or a small fear you let slip. And they remember it. This isn't about not because they're trying to score points, but because they're genuinely paying attention. This kind of engagement is especially meaningful because dismissive avoidants usually don't engage with emotional material unless it serves a purpose. So if they're choosing to lean into your world, your moods, your beliefs, your patterns, that means they're trying to create some kind of emotional map of who you are and what makes you tick. That effort, even if awkward or halting at first, is a major step toward connection. Even more telling is when they don't retreat from your emotions. In the past, they may have shut down or deflected when someone got upset or expressed vulnerability, but if they're starting to hold space for you, even imperfectly, that's a shift in their comfort zone. They may not always say the right thing and they may get quiet when you feel anxious. But if they stay in the room, if they don't minimize or mock what you're going through, that's them stretching into a form of emotional intimacy that feels risky to them, but worth it because it's you. It's also worth noting that dismissive avoidants are usually much more cognitive than emotional. They prefer logic over feelings, and they often intellectualize things to create distance. So when they start asking how you feel rather than what you think, that's a quiet invitation. They're telling you, I'm curious. I'm trying to understand this, even if I haven't lived it myself. That effort, however subtle, signals a desire to build something deeper than surface-level connection. You might also catch them reflecting back their version of empathy. It might not be flowery or emotionally rich, but they'll try in their way. Perhaps by offering a solution, a helpful suggestion, or just staying quiet while you vent. That's how they show caring, by staying present when it would be easier for them to detach. When a dismissive avoidant steps outside of their comfort zone to meet you in yours, even slightly, that's not random. That's affection translated into effort. Dismissive avoidants are masters of self-protection. They construct emotional walls so high and so thick that very few people are ever allowed to glimpse what's behind them. Vulnerability, to them, often feels like danger, a risk that someone might reject, control, or overwhelm them. So they tend to present a version of themselves that is composed, independent, and in control. But here's where it gets interesting. When a dismissive avoidant starts to like you, really like you, they begin to show cracks in that armor. These cracks aren't accidental. They're cautious and intentional signs of trust. When someone with a dismissive avoidant attachment style allows you to see even a small sliver of their emotional world, that is an act of profound courage for them. It's not always obvious. They may not sit you down and pour their heart out, but they might mention something about their past, a difficult family dynamic, a breakup that shaped them, or a moment of failure or insecurity. These disclosures aren't random. They're a test. They're saying, can I show you a little bit of who I really am, and will you still want to stay? For most dismissive avoidants, vulnerability equals exposure, and exposure equals danger. So when they reveal something personal, it often comes wrapped in humor or deflection. They might make a joke about their tendency to shut down emotionally, or they'll say something that sounds casual but carries deep emotional weight. If you're paying attention, you'll realize that these moments are anything but casual. They're moments of connection trying to sneak through the defenses. You might also notice a shift in the way they respond to your vulnerability. In the early stages of connection, they might have brushed past emotional conversations or gotten uncomfortable when things became too deep. But once they begin to trust you, They'll start to tolerate and even engage with those moments more. They'll listen instead of shutting down. They'll stay present instead of disappearing. And occasionally, they'll open up right back. Another way these cracks show is through their behavior, not just their words. They might start letting you into spaces they usually keep private, like their home, their routines, or even their inner thoughts about the future. Planning ahead with you, talking about their goals, or asking for your opinion on something meaningful are all signs that they're letting down their guard. They may not label it as intimacy, but that's exactly what it is. Of course, it's not always linear. Sometimes they'll open up, then retreat. That's part of the process. Vulnerability doesn't come easily or consistently for them. But when someone who is usually closed off begins to let you see the soft parts of them, their fears, their regrets, their hopes, it's not just a random moment. It's evidence that they feel safe enough to stop pretending. They're not just showing you who they are, they're asking if you're willing to hold it gently. One of the most telling signs that a dismissive avoidant actually likes you is when they begin to show signs of protectiveness or subtle jealousy, something that doesn't come naturally to them and often reveals itself in indirect ways. Dismissive avoidants usually operate from a mindset of emotional self-sufficiency. They don't rely on others, and they don't want others to rely on them too much either. So when they start reacting, however subtly, to the idea of losing you or to perceived competition, it's because they've developed a real emotional investment. Whether they're ready to admit it or not, this isn't the kind of jealousy that explodes or tries to control you. Instead, it might show up in quiet comments or questions. For example, if you mention spending time with a new friend, you might notice a shift in their tone or a follow-up question like, "Who was that?" Or, "You've been seeing them a lot lately, ha." On the surface, it might sound casual, but underneath, it's them reaching out to gauge their standing in your life. They're testing the waters to see if they still have a secure place with you. Protectiveness can also manifest when they start taking an interest in your well-being in a more proactive way. Perhaps they check in on you when they know you're going through something stressful, or they offer to help with something in your life, not in a grand over-the-top way, but in small, practical gestures. For someone who typically values emotional detachment, making that kind of effort signals that they care more than they usually allow themselves to. What's important to remember is that for dismissive avoidance, expressing desire or possessiveness is extremely vulnerable. These emotions are risky for them because they require acknowledging their own dependency and feelings, two things they often avoid at all costs. So instead of saying, "I'm scared of losing you," they might tease you about someone else, or become slightly colder for a while as they sort through their emotions. But underneath the surface, there's often a mix of longing, uncertainty, and fear of rejection. You may also notice them becoming more attuned to your patterns and more concerned when they sense distance from you. If they reach out after a period of withdrawal, not because they feel obligated, but because they genuinely want to reconnect, that shows they value the connection. And if they begin to seek reassurance in their own guarded way, even by trying to stay close to you physically or keeping tabs on what's going on in your world, that's their way of managing insecurity. It may not look like emotional openness, but it's their version of it. This type of protectiveness is rarely loud or dramatic, but it's there. It shows up in their desire to remain relevant in your life, to be someone you turn to. For someone who once prided themselves on indifference, this shift, no matter how subtle, is a clear sign of emotional investment. Thank you for showing up for yourself today by listening, learning, and exploring a deeper understanding of connection. Whether you're navigating a relationship right now or preparing for something new, I hope this gave you clarity, compassion, and most importantly, confidence. Take care of your heart, laid with value, and trust that love worth having never asks you to chase it. It meets you halfway. Thank you for being here. Wishing you clarity, connection, and the courage to love smarter, not harder. Until next time, take care and be kind to yourself.